So I'm going to talk about, this idea of what makes a company or an organization a great place to work, and why is that important. But that's probably not as much my idea as it is Barbara Couch's idea. Very early we recognized that I'm kind of the technical guy, and Barbara's the human resources, psychology element of our team. And so I think Barbara's in the back row there, but I just want to thank Barbara for her involvement at Hypertherm. She celebrated last year 25 years with Hypertherm, starting in 1987, when Barbara joined Hypertherm as Vice President of Human Resources. In 1987, we had 105, back then we called them employees. And we were just at the end of the 80s, just beginning to grow the business in a significant sort of way. And we thought adding expertise in the human resources function at Hypertherm was really important as we began to grow. So, as Jeff said, this June 18th, we'll celebrate our 45th anniversary at Hypertherm. Well, you've all, and many of you are family businesses, and you've all heard the joke about family businesses that certainly was true in our household, was that Barbara and I would come home from work and we'd talk about the people at the company that were either driving us crazy or customers in situations that weren't going the way we wanted them to go. And occasionally we'd talk about successes of the businesses and good things happening. But so often we're talking about the things that we're worrying about keeping us up in the middle of the night. And then all of us family business owners kind of sit back and wonder why the children don't want to be in the family business. But we always talked about it. So our three daughters, none of whom have shown any interest in the family business, just to make sure that they didn't have any interest in the family business. During the summer, they do jobs like wire wrap, stripping, working in the wire and harness group, or order picking and various other challenging jobs like that, just to make sure that this wasn't really a job that they wanted to do. But in our family, we carried on the tradition that you heard talked about here yesterday with Kevin, what you've seen in your tours of continuous improvement. And continuous improvement in the business is a good thing to do. I'm not sure our children always totally appreciated all of our attempts to bring continuous improvement into their lives, but we talked about it all the time. So today I want to talk about what makes a company a great place to work. What Sid Finkelstein talked about this morning, how do we get associates in a company to really feel accountability? And we all know what that is, and it sounds like a wonderful thing to have happen in a company. I think the challenge we all have is how do we inculcate that with all the employees at a company. And to be a great place to work, can you have a great place to work that makes plasma cutting equipment? Or do you need, to have a great place to work, do you need to be a golf pro or a ski instructor, something like that. What makes a company a great place to work? But before you can have a great place to work or a great organization to work in, you need to establish the company. And I just want to digress a little bit into the early history of Hypertherm and why that impacts everything that has come after that. In 1968, a professor at the engineering school at Dartmouth College, Bob Dean, who's still alive, he's now about 88 years old, and I started Hypertherm in 1968. We had the idea in 1968 that if we could improve plasma cutting, that it would have a much bigger market. In the 1960s, plasma cutting was used for cutting stainless steel. And really cut quality was not very, very important because the alternative methods for cutting stainless steel were just so bad. Oxy-fuel powder burning was a terrible process that made very bad quality cuts. And so just cutting it a little bit better got you market share in stainless. But stainless, as we all know, is a very small percentage of steel manufactured and consumed in the world. And so we had the idea in 1968. I always say this, our idea sounds better in retrospect, but I think it really was our idea that if we can improve plasma cutting, edge quality, number one, but also reliability of the equipment, if we could improve those two things, we could expand into the much bigger market application of mild steel cutting. And that was the idea for the formation of Hypertherm. But before that, Bob Dean was president of Creari Incorporated, which is across the street up in Hanover, which is a research consulting company that I joined after Dartmouth. And one of the projects we had at Creari was improving plasma spraying, which is a process for creating coatings on materials. We were trying to improve plasma spraying for coating what are called Yankee dryers that are used in paper making. So our client was Scott Paper Company, and we actually did quite a bit of successful work in improving coating quality on these Yankee dryers. As Scott Paper Company would say, it's to make low basis weight paper. Those of us would call it toilet paper. So, but there was and is still a big demand. So after we concluded that project, we thought we knew some stuff about plasma devices. So we were an engineering consulting company at Creari. So we decided to try to get some research and development support funding for plasma cutting. It's very similar technology to plasma spraying. And we developed a proposal and we pitched it to both Airco and Air Products. Both of those two companies had, in 1968, they had mechanized plasma cutting products in their product portfolio. And so we proposed a $25,000 one-year project to first Airco and then Air Products. And they turned us down. They said, what do you guys know about cutting? And they turned us down. And that was a pretty pivotal point in Hypertherm's birthing process, if you will, because a very standard clause in consulting contracts is that if we had gotten that consulting a contract from either Airco or Air Products, we would have been prohibited from competing in that field for a period of 2 or 3 years after the project concluded. So it's pretty safe to say if we had been successful in pitching the project to one of those companies that, it's probably pretty safe to say that Hypertherm would not exist today because we would have been prohibited from starting. So we're, Bob's an engineer. I was an engineer graduating from Thayer School at Dartmouth College. We didn't know much about business, but we thought we had some good ideas for plasma cutting. We hadn't built 0 devices at that time. We had done work in plasma spraying, but that was owned by Scott Paper Company. So we searched around. We visited some venture capital firms in Boston to try to get funding to start Hypertherm. I pitched it to several people. I have a very vivid memory of doing this elaborate pitch on high temperature plasma devices. We'd develop plasma cutting that would take 2 or 3 years. And then we'd go on to other applications of plasma devices. The only way to get temperatures of 20,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and chemistry and material processing and garbage disposal, really great presentation. So I thought, and this investment banker, I still remember him sitting at his desk, we're making the pitch. And he looked at Bob and I and he said, "Don't do it." Maybe a little bit more detail. So maybe like again Sid was talking about this morning, knowing when to take advice and when not to take advice. But that was advice we didn't take. So instead of we were unsuccessful in getting venture capital money, but Bob Dean had a few friends. His father put in $10,000. He had a friend at Ford Motor Company. He put in $10,000. We raised $60,000 to start Hypertherm in 1968. I went to my parents and I wanted to buy my $10,000 share of Hypertherm at the beginning. So I went to my mother and stepfather and pitched them on this great idea. And they both said to me, "We're not going to put in money in your venture because you're going to appreciate it a lot more if you do it on your own." So, yeah, right. So we hadn't named the company yet. So we had some brainstorming sessions, temperature, stuff. So we very early came up with the idea of hypertherm, hyper being high and therm being temperature. But we kept on searching for, quote, better names. And but finally, after about 2 or 3 months, the Secretary of State needed the form filled out for registering the company. So we just kind of said, well, Hypertherm is it. So we named the company Hypertherm. So so we were up and going. We still didn't have a product. We started working on a plasma cutting development and made some kind of rapid progress right at the beginning. Water injection plasma cutting was invented in that first 6 months. We didn't know about water injection, mechanized cutting prior to starting the company. And we made some good progress. But we also rapidly, as you might project, ran through the initial $60,000 that we had raised. And kept on missing product development deadlines. And finally, after 2 years, Bob Dean and the board of directors at Creari said, we're not going to support this work anymore. And by that time, we had, Creari had co-signed a loan for $100,000 that they had guaranteed with their collateral. So we had put $160,000 into the business by 1970. But I was on a trip to a customer, and I got a phone call from one of the people back here who worked at Hypertherm and said that the Creari people had just fired everybody at Hypertherm, and you're supposed to get back as soon as possible because we've all been fired. I remember telling my father the story that Bob Dean called me into his office and said, we're deciding to shut down Hypertherm and you're fired. And I, in my naivete, said, Bob, you can't fire me. It's only the board of directors that can fire me. So that stopped them for 24 hours or something like that. I remember telling that story to my father, and my father had a subsidiary somewhere, and the president of that subsidiary pulled that line on my father, and my father said to him, look, I can call a board meeting in 2 minutes. Do you want me to call a board meeting? You're fired. So anyway, Bob kind of let me have a few days to and I managed, at that time, I guess maybe my parents thought that I had shown some persistence here. They did lend me $10,000, which allowed me to buy into the company, and I guaranteed the $100,000 note to the bank and took control of the company in 1970. We moved Hypertherm to the garage that you've all seen a picture of, and really hungered down expenses. There are probably only about 5 associates at Hypertherm, and we tried to develop plasma cutting equipment. We had, some good ideas at that point, had a couple of patents. But what we were really missing by that time, 1970, was kind of the difference between a piece of laboratory equipment that you'd use in a university laboratory and a piece of industrial equipment that's going to end up on the floor of a production plant like Ryerson Steel or somewhere. It's not going to be people in white lab coats operating the equipment and taking ultra good care of it. It's going to be people that, are, maybe not quite white lab coat type of folks. So that was a learning opportunity, really learning what it takes to design a piece of equipment that was not only innovative and state-of-the-art and pushing the technology, but also would work reliably day after day after day. And we put a big premium on reliability because, once again, back in 1970 or so, plasma cutting equipment, in addition to having poor cut quality, also was unreliable. I remember one of the first pieces of equipment we replaced was at Clark Equipment Company, forklift. It had a Union Carbide system in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and it was a 3-torch system. And you'd push the start button, and one would start, sometimes 2 would start, rarely would all 3 start. And so, the operator just after a while would give up and just run 1 torch. They never really ran all 3 at the same time. And that was really, so the recognition we needed to make it good cut quality, excellent cut quality, but we also needed excellent reliability. It needed to be an industrial process. But that was a long learning curve. The difference between innovation, coming up with a new idea, and then all the work that's required to implement that innovation. It was Thomas Edison that said invention is 1 part inspiration and 99 parts perspiration. This kind of what you need to do to reduce a new idea to practice and be able to make it over and over again. But those were tough early years at Hypertherm. I remember one time I missed a payroll and paying Tim Dole, who was our production supervisor at Hypertherm. I thought Tim was a good person to miss payroll with because he was a fellow. I had given him some stock options and shares in Hypertherm, so he was a part owner in the business. But so I didn't pay him that Wednesday. And Tim stormed into my office, kind of, back then I had an office, and he slammed the door and he said, don't ever miss payroll again. And I really learned a lesson, that was, people took this paying stuff pretty seriously. And so I never missed a payroll again, except for my own. And so that was a real tough time in the finances of the business. And I would say the worst time was I went back to the bank, which is now Citizens Bank, which I continue to not do any business with. And they call on us all the time. You don't know why I refused to tell them. But they turned me down in 1970. I think a machine shop was going out of business, and the guy had died. The wife was willing to sell all the stuff in the machine shop for $5,000. So I went to Citizens and wanted, and they said, no, that's too risky a loan. But the things got so bad that I went to, back then it was called beneficial finance. It's now, it's a payday, what do they call them? A payday lender. And, literally these companies will lend money to anybody. So I asked to borrow $1,000 and they turned me down. And so, as Barbara well knows, to this day, I pay bills the day I get them. I'm neurotic about paying bills because, again, some of you, I'm sure, have had this experience of, juggling accounts payable. Who do you have to pay this week, and who can you stretch out a little bit longer as we utilized our vendor base to supply us needed capital for growing the business. And so a lot of those early years also coincide with luck, so that, for example, copper was readily available. Same day shipment, same day shipment and stuff like that, where in some other years copper got into short supply, so you'd need 3 months of it on hand or something. And so part of it is just luck, that we could exist with very little inventory and very little capital invested in the business. But we got through those tough times, and we tend to remember the good times more than the bad times. One kind of tradition we had at Hypertherm was after a good month, we'd celebrate with a case of beer and maybe a volleyball game on Friday afternoon, and talk about the week and how successful the shipments had gone, and had a few beers. And that tradition lasted a few years until we started having a second shift. And I began to realize that combining a cookout with alcohol at the same time a second shift was running was maybe not the smartest thing to do. So now we have to be like a big company and no alcohol in the premises and things like that. But that was a fun time. We'd play volleyball, we'd play basketball. So as I said, in 1987, Barbara Couch joined the business, 105 employees, our first vice president of human resources. We had, prior to Barbara joining the company, the human resources function was done by the head of finance. And you kind of got a sense of the HR function at Hypertherm. On the door to his office was a cartoon. Barbara, what did it say? Crybabies need not apply. That was our human resource policy, and we'll help you out. So Barbara joined in 1987. Barbara was previously a guidance and counselor at a school in Plainfield, New Hampshire. And Barbara convinced the principal of the school that if she could take a 6-month leave of absence and come work for Hypertherm, maybe get things going at Hypertherm. I mean, I think very clearly she wanted to make sure it was going to work, because if it didn't, she could go back to her job at Plainfield. And so luckily for us, that 6 months has turned into 25 plus years. And really, kind of like I said at the beginning, I'm the technical guy, kind of rational. Barbara's the people person and intuitive, and really has brought a lot of the values of Hypertherm to Hypertherm. So after we started having an HR department, Barbara developed an orientation program, and we began to think about the values that we have at Hypertherm. And what can we do to kind of write down the values and also talk about them when people join the company. But we were pretty serious about it, that we wanted to talk about the real values at Hypertherm. I think we've all seen companies that on the wall have a sign, a plaque that says these are our corporate values. And sometimes, unfortunately, corporate values are developed by a team of perhaps senior executives. Maybe they've read a book. They really want to talk about what they hope their values are, or that sound good or something, as opposed to are they really the values of the company. It's so easy to write down things like respect for the individual, or sometimes I like to say, if you read the CEO letter in a lot of annual reports, you'll talk about, they'll talk in their CEO letter that our employees are our most important asset. But then really what you want to do is say, well, how do you act? How do you actualize the statement that employees are our most important asset? And often, sometimes these statements are very easy to write down, but actually very hard to have programs and policies and the things that really bring them to fruition. Like at Hypertherm, one of our values is respect for the individual. So we bring that to life. One of the things that we very early in the company and after Barbara joined the company, we started not liking the employee word. And this is something that is kind of unique to Hypertherm, is we think that the word employee, we don't like the word management and we don't like the word employee, because to us, it implies that these are two separate classes of people with different rules, and that just doesn't strike us as a way to make the company feel like one team. So early on, we tried, first of all, we tried to figure out a different word, and we used the word associate. Maybe not the best word, but everybody at Hypertherm is an associate, and we don't use the employee word. I kind of came to this idea by, one of the experiences I've had playing my sales role at Hypertherm would be calling on our customers. I can remember calling a steel service center in New Jersey. And, it would be very typical of fabricators then, and unfortunately today, is the front is carpeted, it's air conditioned, it's quiet. They're nice offices for the executives. And then there's a wall and with doors in it. You walk through the doors and you get out to the plant floor. It's hot, it's noisy, it's probably dirty. And there couldn't be kind of more plain evidence of the fact that the management team are in front and the workers are in the back. And you've got different work rules. And we just fight against having we don't believe in two classes of people. We believe in team members. And when we built the building, the first big building we built, I tried to have no walls between the office and the plant floor. But then it turns out that there are fire code regulations, else there wouldn't be walls between the office. And so we kind of try to do the best that we can by having lots of glass windows. And like Evan was talking about yesterday, the idea that people, the engineers, the marketing people, the procurement people, and the manual systems team can look right through the windows to where equipment is being assembled. So if there's a problem, if there's an improvement opportunity, if the flow stops, like Kevin was talking about yesterday, we can bring people together very quickly and we can feel like one team. So we try to break down those barriers that make people feel like second-class citizens. Again, Sid Finkelstein this morning was talking about the idea of accountability. What we want is people to feel accountable. And I just say that one sure way to people make or to encourage people not to be accountable is to treat them differently, to treat certain people a certain way and other people another way. You know, unfortunately, there are some labor laws, so we have to treat overtime differently between exempt and non-exempt, and we have to do some things, but as much as possible, we try to treat everybody the same. And yesterday in the tours around 71 Heater Road, you saw some evidence of that. You know, I'm sure maybe some people told you the story that when we built our first building in 97, the first big building expansion in 1997, you know, we spent, first of all, the idea that we'd get rid of offices, you know, and that was, some people were having a real hard time with that. CFO, not here anymore, but said, you know, I've got confidential things on my desk. I can't be out in the main area. We had an engineer that said, you know, I think hard and I can't be out in an open work environment. I'll get distracted. Plus I have all these books and papers and I won't have any place to store things. But, and then we started talking, but you know, we finally kept on talking about it. Fine, and then we started talking about, well, how big would the workstation be? I like workstation. I don't particularly like cubicle, but that's, you know, workstation sounds better to me. But we started, you know, they had like 8 feet by 6 foot workstations, and they had 6 feet by 5 feet workstations. And so there'd be discussion about, okay, customer service representatives could be in 6 by 5 cubicles or workstation. But you know, an engineer would have to be an 8 by 6. But then what if it's a customer service supervisor? Maybe that would be, but they have lots of paper. So we finally ended up, you know, just saying everybody's got the same size workstation, and that's what we do today. They're all the same size, so whether you're the CEO or a customer service rep or a procurement specialist, you have the same size workstation. We, Kevin mentioned yesterday our no layoff policy. We've had this no layoff policy for 45 years. And you know, when we first started, there are probably 2 reasons. Once again, I saw companies hire people and then lay off people through the cycles of the welding supply business. And it just looked to me like a tough way to maintain morale and you know, respect for the individual. These aren't machine tools, they're people with family, and they rely on you for a place to work. And then secondly, as we began our quality journey, it also seemed to me that if you really wanted people to improve productivity and improve operations and improve the company, if at the same time you're saying, okay, where it took 10 people to do this job, now we can do it in 8 people. If you lay off those 2 people, it seems to me as rather demotivating for it doesn't take long for the company to figure out that this isn't exactly what I want to sign up for. So we had this no layoff policy. You know, it's been tested through some of the recessions that we've gone through. In 1981, we went to a 4-day work week for a while. because we didn't have enough work for everybody working 5 days a week. Certainly in 2009, as we all remember, the first quarter of 2009, the trend lines were not going in the right direction. And we kind of said, look, let's give it, say, 6 months here, the second and third quarters, and maybe October 1, if things are still going downhill, maybe we have to think about it a little bit. But we didn't do anything in 2009. We insourced, people did gardening. We found some of our associates were actually air conditioning technicians. We put out an email and found 2 air conditioning technicians. So we could, where we had outsourced taking care of our air conditioners, we could use our talent in the company to do service. We did somebody knew how to do sheetrock, so we were modifying some building. And so you get the idea. We did just about everything, including lawn maintenance. One of what I find a little humorous is as business began to pick up, particularly like the people doing lawn maintenance wanted to keep doing that. To come back in and work on printed circuit boards and so sure, So and we got through that. And again, as Kevin mentioned yesterday, we were in a wonderful position in 2010 with a largely intact workforce. As business began to come back, we were ready with our people ready. We had done continuous improvement, re-layout of some of the plant, and we're ready to jump right in there. So, hindsight's a great thing, but it was a very beneficial decision for Hypertherm. Another one of our rewards, and I'm going a few minutes over here, Jeff. Okay. That is in profit sharing, and I think a lot of you have heard about profit sharing at Hypertherm. We've been doing annual cash-based profit sharing since 1976. 76 was the first year we made a profit at Hypertherm. And I can't really remember what caused us to say, let's share in the profitability of Hypertherm with every single associate at the company. But it's a real tradition at Hypertherm now. We've paid profit sharing just about every year. Last year, it was 19% of your base salary, so it's a significant once a year profit sharing. But then, like in 2009, we still made a profit in 2009. Our profit sharing was 6%. So our associates are used to the idea, because it's actually happened, that profitability, the earnings of the company, has fluctuated over the years, and it's been as high as 34% of base salary to last year is 19. The year before it was 26. So it fluctuates around, but it's a cash-based profit sharing. Several years ago, well, maybe like 10 years ago, we had I was beginning to, 15 years ago, I was thinking, cash-based rewards, that people were probably just spending it all right away. Maybe we should defer some of that. And I remember a focus group we put together, but there was just no interest in deferred. I joke, the state motto of New Hampshire is live free or die, and we like cash-based profit sharing. But then in 2001, we added the employee stock ownership plan, or what we call it, Hypertherm, the Hypertherm stock ownership plan. And that was a way, ESOPs, and some of you are ESOPs, as a way to share ownership in the company with the employees, associates of the company. And so now, through the years from 2001, approximately 32% of Hypertherm is owned by the associates at Hypertherm. So the average, Barbara and I meet with people who are just coming into the HSOP. Their 1-year anniversary is when they're officially part of the plan, and we meet with them on their kind of enrollment date and talk about ownership. And again, it's getting back to, again, what Sid was talking about this morning, accountability, and this idea that, I like to explain it. It's kind of like the way you take care of your own car versus the way you take care of your rental car. You're much more careful with your own car. And to try to get that feeling of accountability in all the associates at Hypertherm. And I was talking to Jim Earlbeck yesterday, and he was pushing at that a little bit, and I finally thought to myself, we're not going to get everybody feeling like they're an owner of their own business. What you do if you ran your own restaurant or you had your own grocery store. But if we can get 50, 60, 70% of our associates really feeling like an owner, feeling accountable for what they're doing, I think we're so much further ahead than a company that is trying to organize their workforce based upon either money, if you do good, I'll pay you a little bit more money, or more typically in a lot of companies, based upon fear. So the idea, you do your job, and I'm going to be watching and measuring, and it's a very clear deal. You don't do your job, you're going to be out the door, and you just better watch it, because I'm watching every minute, and my management team has got an eye on you. And if you don't do good, you're going to be fired. And that's just not, it doesn't, once again, in our opinion, build accountability. That builds anger, it builds, how can you beat the system? How can you fool the management? And all kinds of non-productive activity. So, I was going to talk about, just a couple of other things that are different about Hypertherm. Once again, you'd read honesty and integrity in just about every company's, either their CEO letter or their values statement. We really believe that at Hypertherm, we tell stories about examples of honesty and integrity. What does it mean? We live it, and one of the things we do is we don't have time clocks. I don't know if some of the tour guides yesterday talked about that, but we don't believe in time clocks. And kind of what I say is, now we have to keep track of hours, right? Because Department of Labor, exempt, non-exempt, and all that. So at Hypertherm, it's on the honor system. It used to be pieces of paper. About 15 years ago, you now enter it on a computer, and daily you type in the number of hours that you work at Hypertherm. And sometimes funny, some of the supervisor team leaders don't like it. They kind of like time clocks, you punch in, punch out. There's no argument about whether you worked 8 hours or 7 hours and a quarter, because it's there in black and white. I like to say it requires you to be a team leader. That's your job. You need to, if you don't know whether your people are on the job, you should have an idea whether the place is operating correctly. Like again, like Kevin said yesterday, is flow happening, whether it's the office or the production floor. So we don't have time cards. It's an honor system. One of the things I like to say is, if we can't trust our people to put in their own time card in terms of writing down their hours, how can we trust them to put a quality product out the door and do continuous improvement on all the things that we ask our associates to do. So again, so I'm going to kind of wrap up. This building, I think you can tell we're proud of this building, but it kind of epitomizes once again our philosophy of organizational design. We believe that manufacturing, marketing, engineering, procurement should all be together. And you saw that in your tours yesterday. The manual systems team and the manual torch and consumables team are located here in this building. They're integral teams. They measure on sales and their contribution, and we like for them to focus on their customers and try to keep it small enough that you feel like a team. So these teams are maybe 100 people, 150 people strong. And again, so yesterday in your tour, you can see that we believe strongly in space design. The architectural design of the building can be done in such a way to encourage team interaction. And that if you really want teams to work well together, you need to have space for them to interact. We believe that sometimes casual interaction, walking to and fro the cafeteria or to get a cup of coffee or to sit in other areas of the plant brings the opportunity for people to kind of cross-fertilize and learn about what other people are doing. I mean, I hear over and over again stories like you'll just hear a snippet of conversation and maybe you know something about what they're talking about, and you can just say, I can contribute to that. So we believe strongly in that. I was going to talk, but I'll just kind of mention it briefly. I went to a meeting this morning of CEOs in the Upper Valley, and we're talking about workforce development. And one of the real challenges at Hypertherm has been adding new associates to the company. And we've worked hard on developing what we call the Hypertherm Technical Training Institute that is designed to train incoming manufacturing technicians in basic machine tool operation, and it's a 9-week program. We've recently expanded that program for our technical service engineers, as we've expanded internationally and in North America to improve we've expanded geographically, but almost more importantly, we've expanded the product range. So the technical service people, their skill sets have to be much broader than they were a number of years ago with CNC controls and height controls and plasma and computer-aided manufacturing software. So we've had to improve our training capabilities, and that's a separate building with instructors a couple of miles away from here. When I took machine shop, we used a South Bend lathe that cost about $500 or something like that. Now we're training people on CNC machine tools, and we want to train them on the same machine tool that they're going to be operating out here on the plant floor. So they're like $500,000 machines. And so the capital investment in having a dedicated training facility where we can really concentrate on training these people versus what we did about 7 years ago. We'd have operators who'd be, leaning over their shoulder of somebody who was actually trying to make product. And it was a very ineffective way of teaching people how to run machine tools. But we try to build accountability in our associates at Hypertherm, and we try to do it with these shared values that I'm talking about, the idea of respect for the individual, the idea of shared rewards, that if we do this, if we run this company effectively, we're going to share in rewards in terms of yearly profitability and earnings of the business, but we're also going to share in the long-term growth of the company in terms of the employee stock ownership plan. So it's meant to be motivational. It's meant to be encouraging and to count on the accountability. And because something I believe extremely strongly is that people want to be part of an organization that they can feel proud of, that they feel like they're contributing to, and that brings them a sense of pride and belonging to that organization. And we see that happening in sports teams, somebody's softball league, or we see it in church groups. And what I want to see it is in organizations like Hypertherm, that we can have that same sense of accomplishment and sense of teamwork, sense of pride in an organization that creates products and services for the world. So I like our American Building America logo because I really believe in it. And so thank you very much for listening, and thank you for attending.